Rish Lakish Amar, which is towards the top. Rabbi Shimon Lakish Amar. 5 lines down. Yeah, your next page. Next page. Chav Alpha base. Rabbi Shimon Lakish Amar. Afilu chaver sheshiyach lechaver tzarich la'aser. If a chaver sent to another chaver, the recipient has to take off meiser. Okay, they sent this fruit, which is this type of fruit which you're allowed to send without meisering. So even one chaver sends to another chaver, the recipient has to meiser. Chavraya boya, and so the chaver asked, Nicha amoretz choshud, how can you say this? And amoretz is suspect to send stuff which is not tight. Chaver mi choshud is a Talmid Chacham suspect to send stuff which is not tight. So it says more Rabbi Yossi said, V'chi amoretz l'gabe truma lav kechaveru. You didn't pay attention with what we learned previously, what we learned yesterday. It says there that not only do you have to take off meiser of that which you receive, but even truma. There's no amoretz in the days of Chazal who didn't at least take off truma. So therefore it must be that in these areas you don't have to take off anything, whether you're a chaver or an amoretz. Because if there was a differentiation between amoretz and chaver, so it'd say that you always have to take off meiser, but you don't have to take off truma, right? But by virtue of the fact that the recipient also take off truma, it's clear that in certain commodities, Chazal were matir, sending them without taking truma off. So that's what Gemara says. Elakini, this is the way to understand it. The minhag became, and this minhag is alpi chachomim. The certain minhagim where it says shekein nagu bnei adam, where Chazal agreed, like there's says Gemara in Brachos, the Kavanaki brings down, where very well known Gemara that says that we're noeg in certain things like halachas, I forget what they are now. By Israel Chaim and Keva, by Rashis, I guess by the Matnas Kahuna, that the velt was knowing not to give it to Kohanim because the Kohanim have to prove that they're actually Kohanim. Bizman is that we don't give Rashis, I guess, and Israel Chaim and Keva, and there's another one of that sort. So it says there that Nagu not to do it. The Nagu there was with rabbinic sanction. So to here, there's certain kamais which are sent from friend to friend without taking up Trumas Ma'asros, it's with the rabbinic sanction. It applies equally whether the sender is an amoretz or a Talmid Chacham. He's not required to take off Trumas Ma'asros in these specific commodities which we mentioned yesterday, which is stuff which is what were they? Kinds of olives, and which are going to be pressed and haven't yet been pressed, and onions or any other type of bulb which is made to replant, and flax with seeds in it. So all these things, since they're not kamar malacha, Chazal allowed them to be sent without taking Trumas Ma'asros, even if a chaver is sending to a chaver. Okay, let's go back to the Mishnah. Beginning of the parak, Chaf Alpha Amralf, second line. Some of you uproots turnips and radishes from in their yard, and replant it in another part of their yard, lizera, for the purpose of seeds, chayav, he's got to take up Trumas Ma'asros before replanting them. Now, yesterday I told you I didn't understand the Gemara we learned yesterday, because the Gemara differentiates between where you take grain and replant it, where you're not chayav to give Trumas Ma'asros before you replant it, where as opposed to here where you take the bulbs. You take turnips and radishes and replant them, where you do have to take Trumas Ma'asros before you replant them. Yesterday I didn't understand it, today I do understand it. The reason is because the lephis and snonos, when you plant them, you're planting them that next time around they should grow seeds. And seeds are exempt from Trumas Ma'asros. So that's it. Now when you replant them, you're going to lose their chiyuv and Trumas Ma'asros. You're lost. That's why before you replant them, you have to take advantage of the fact that they're now still food. and take Trumas Ma'asros off of them. As opposed to the grain, when you replant them, it might, or you're planting a seed or something else. That's what chitim are. They're two different types. They're not two different types of plants. When you plant turnips and radishes, when you want to use them as seeds, they look different. They're harder. They're not edible, as opposed to when you cultivate them for food. So therefore, you're replanting l'zera. It's going to lose its status food. Therefore, you have to chaparayin. You have to take advantage before you replant it to take off Trumas Ma'asros now for the Kohanim and Levim. But in the case of the other hand, the case of the grain is grain. There's no difference between grain planted for seed or grain planted not for seed. So therefore, you don't have to take Trumas Ma'asros off before you replant it. You can replant it and then take Trumas Ma'asros off of it after it grows. Okay? So that's what he says here. Chayiv, you're chayiv now, because this is now the goren. This is now the time of chayiv. Let's go to the Gemara. Tanya, we learned. Ha'oker shesolim. Where is it in here? You don't have this. What's going on here?
Our next thing is Malav Shnia Ben Reserve.
Okay, so he has a whole brayso here which comes before your Gemara. Okay, Tanya. Okay, just listen to me I'll tell you when I finish reading it. Tanya, okay, somebody uproots vegetable bulbs, or any other vegetable which is made for planting. Yeah, we yesterday I called them saplings, but I'm afraid in retrospect that was misleading. It's not saplings of a tree. It's vegetable shoots, okay? Bulbs or any other shoot, which you're going to replant. So if you uproot vegetables from within your yard, liton to replant them, lizera. And the second time around, you're just going to grow seeds. Or hefker. The second time around, you're going to be mafkir them. And of course, hefker is exempt from Trumas Ma'asros. Or b'chutzlart. The second time around, you're going to grow them in chutzlart. It's on Eretz Yisrael. Or l'machon l'goy. Or the second time around, when they grow, you're going to sell them to a goy. Before you replant them, you have to take meiser off them. Why is that? Because if you now by replanting them, you're going to exempt. As I tried to explain before, you're going to exempt them from Trumas Ma'asros. So you have to chaparayin, you have to take advantage while it's still chayiv with Trumas Ma'asros, while it's still considered food, and take off the Trumas Ma'asros now. Okay? Now, for lo shanya, picking up where you have it inside, for lo shanya, this is by the little bays with the little asterisk, about halfway down the page. 8 lines to the bottom. 9 lines to the bottom. Lo shani ben lazera ben lahefker. Wait a minute. It doesn't matter what you're replanting for. If you're replanting for seed or replanting for the purpose of hefker, but is there no difference? The Tamatanina that we learn over there. Anybody whose heart.
You don't have the part about chutzlars in there.
No, he takes up chutzlars and puts it later. He cut and pasted later on. Okay, he's going to a guy in a regular field. He can give as much pay as he wants, right? We said you can make most of your field pay as long as you leave something over. You can make a pay. Can keep on exempting all your grain from meiser, because pay is exempt from meiser, until of course you get some sort of pile, right, and make a miruach. A smooth pile. So there we don't find a guy who wants to make stuff hefker. Let him make it hefker and let it exempt him from meisers. Why over here you're making the guy such a pain? You're saying he wants to replant it for the purpose of making hefker. He's got to take up Trumas Ma'asros beforehand. There we let a guy get away with making stuff peah or hefker. Same idea. He doesn't have to take up Trumas Ma'asros.
But here he's retaining possession.
How does he retain possession?
Even if it's chutzlar, he's still retaining possession of the.
Only a chutzlar son, and now he makes it hefker. It's sold. That's one of the other cases.
No, I'm saying that there's a difference.
You're correct about the case of chutzlar. We're going to talk about that. But the case where he replants it and makes it hefker the second time around, he plants it wild. Why in that case does he have to take a Trumas Ma'asros before he replants it? That's Gemara's kasha.
Maybe he'll grab it back.
No, Gemara doesn't say that. I mean, doesn't need to be a chashash, because over there, in this brisa we just quoted, or Mishnah actually in Peah, says you can make as much as your land, Peah or Hefker, and we're not afraid you're going to grab it back, and it's exempt from Trumas Ma'asros. So what's the difference? So it says, where Tamanu Mafkira Kol. I'll tell you, very simple. There, the anim have constant and consistent access, right? Because you're continuously mafkir, right? But here, right now, they don't have access to what you have. In other words, what you're about to replant, you didn't make, it's not hefker. It's only after it grows you're making it hefker. So therefore, there we let you get away with it. We say, okay, you're making payo, you're being mafker. As long as you never asserted any ownership whatsoever. Is this what there's something? No, you said the reverse. You said you're going to assert ownership later on. You're saying you have ownership on it now. In other words, before you plant it, it's yours.
No, I meant really for later on.
But that's not what he's saying here. He's saying right now it's yours, okay? Baramhacha hu mafkir ala gidulin. What's he making hefker? Only after it grows, not now. So therefore, it's a two-stage process here. And that's why he's chayav Trumas Ma'asros now, because right now he hasn't yet been mafkirit. Later on, yes, but not now. So therefore, right now, we don't allow it to get away without taking up Trumas Ma'asros.
So right now you're growing in the chutzlaretz.
No, this is all in Eretz Yisrael still. There are two separate cases. One is being mafkir in Eretz Yisrael, and one is a chutzlaretz.
No, I'm talking about the next.
All right, so let's see the next case.
The only problem with that is there isn't a time. There isn't a time there on which you're chayav Trumas Ma'asros unless there's an action that you do. There isn't a time. So here, so we're saying that before.
Yeah, but that's why the Mishnah emphasizes V'mneshu Garnon. Would you pile them up together now with the intent of replanting? So even though this pile is not made for the purpose of miruach in the classic sense, nonetheless we give it the status of miruach. Because the pile for replanting in this case we fine you on. Okay? So it says the Gemara, Vatani. Now the way the Grua teaches this up, Vatani, Vatninon, it's a statement, not a question. Vatninon chutzlaretz. And the same thing is, this is similar to the case of the Brides of chutzlaretz. But in chutzlaretz also, eventually it'll be exempt, that's right, but right now where is it? It's in your possession, in the Holy Land, right? So therefore right now it's chayiv and Trumas Ma'asros, right? And says the Gemara, Shani ben Ika Legidulin. By chutzlaretz and by hefker in our brisa, there's no difference between. I mean, there is a difference. There is. Do you have shani or you don't?
Where's shani?
Yeah, shani ben chutzlaretz ben Ika Legidulin. He throws in. He takes out the word chutzlaretz, but it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. Shani ben chutzlaretz ben Ika Legidulin. By chutzlaretz and by hefker, the same thing. Yes, that which grows later on is going to be hefker, but right now the ikar, that's yours. You're keeping it in your backyard, as opposed to ka. Now, everybody has grave difficulties with the word ka, which means hacha. But I don't know. I'm surprised they have difficulties because we all know in Yerushalmi what does hacha very often mean? There, right? So here it means there. Here he means there. Hachalo shania ben ikal gidulin. There in Peah, where it discusses the hefker or the Peah, there's no difference between the primary growth and that which is growing afterwards. Whatever you have, you're mafkir on the spot. In other words, here we make it hefker later on when it grows again. But right now, what is it? Yours. So that's why we're mechayim in Trumas Ma'asros night right now. There in Peah, as it grows, you're mafkir it. There's no something later on which you're going to be mafkir. This right now in your field, you're mafkir. So that's why there, they didn't find you would say take Trumas Ma'asros off at any other stage because there are no two stages to talk about. So therefore, it's not relevant to that case. Okay? Is that clear so far? You have no idea. Well, it's a great length here. I don't know. It's pretty easy. Okay, I'll die to Rav Shimon Lakish. According to Rav Shimon Lakish, Omar, Tevel Batel Barov. Now, this is a sugya which we have not yet really had, There was mentioned in passing in Trumos, but it's going to come up much more detail in Chala. Rabbi Shimon Lakish says Tevel is Bata Barov. If you have Tevel, it gets canceled by being a majority of something else. So here,
This sounds strange. Isn't it somehow like this table? Isn't it somehow the flip side of it? Like Truma Meiser is a davarship of minyan or something?
No, I thought you were going to say it's davar shesh l'matir. Right, Tevel is davar shesh l'matir, and that's why we hold it's not bothered. We don't pass on Rabbi Yochanan. Hey, we have a general principle: everything which you can rectify, so we never rely on bittul. So Tevel is davar shesh l'matir, right? Because you can rectify it. You just take off trumas from meisers, so it's never bata, right? So, but Reish Lakish holds it is bata. Atayt Shimon Lakish to Amar Tevel bata b'rov holds Tevel is canceled by majority. Nicha. I understand what's going on here, meaning that later on it's going to be hefker, right? It's going to be hefker. The hefker is going to cancel the Tevel, so you don't take off the trumas l'maisis is losing because you won't take off trumas l'maisis later on. El Atayt Rabbi Yochanan McCoy Rabbi Yochanan Du Amar who said ain't a Tevel bata b'rov. Tevel is never bata barov. So what's the difference if it grows into hefker? Yamti dat shiakti, let him wait till it grows, and let it become hefker. The yaisel lefikulo, let him take off meiser. Now here it says lefikulo, it's a little bit of a problem. Why he shouldn't have to take off meiser on all the hefker, should only have to take off meiser on the proportional amount of what was previously the chayiv, you know. Let's say he planted 5 bushels of turnips, and he got 50 bushels. You should only have to take meiser off the 5 bushels, not off the 50. But it seems like it's a chumrah. I don't understand exactly how the chumrah works, but since you don't know where the 5 bushels he planted is among the 50, so we make him take off from all 50. But the bottom line is, so let him plant the tevel. The tevel's not bought, he'll take off later on, or he'll tithe it. So says the Gemara, Neymar, perhaps we could say, Neymar literally means, or we could say, but here it means, maybe we could say. Neymar, Tapacha Beisam Rav, now, Mapli Rabbi Yochanan, Mapli Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. He's got something different here. Not very different. He just throws in the following words. Oneimar Rabbi Ba. I guess he had Rabbi Abba saying this. Rabbi Ba. Ma pligin. Now pick it up again. Ma pligin. Where they argue Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish betevel shnit bal dvar Torah. By tevel, which is tevel d'oraisa. Avo betevel shnit bal midivreim. But tevel, which is only tevel d'rabanan. Kol ama moide. Everybody can see it's tevel bata barov. That tevel is canceled by majority. And here we're dealing with tevel d'rabanan. Now, why is this tevel d'rabanan here? It's a trick question. Let's see if you can come with a reason. The pasha reason. Why is this tevel d'rabanan? Because it's vegetables. That's what the Rashi Releu says. Because it's vegetables. The problem is he's going to run into problems later on. It's not going to work later in the sukkah. So there the Kavanoki says it's not really tevel d'rabanan. It means stuff which is not nigmar malachto. Wasn't completed. Because before you planted it, you never fully completed the harvest process because you had in mind already before you completed the process to replant it. So it's never nigmar malachto. So he says what it means is that stuff which is not nigmar malachto is batal barov. Now that's not real tevel, because when the stuff become real tevel? Only after gmar malacha, right? So it's a paradox. We're saying tevel midrabanan about something which never really became tevel. But that's okay. That's what they mean by tevel midrabanan here. Something which the rabbi said is a problem. That's really in a broad brushstroke what we're talking about here. So it says the Gemara, again, tevel shnipa divreim by tevel which is the rabbanan, kol ha'mamadin, everybody can see it, shatevel bata barov. Hey, si Rabbi Abar Kana Kumid Rabbi Yasi. So Rabbi Bar Cohen, it says here, as for Rabbi Yasi, didn't we learn? Kayetze Boze say Misuk. You have olives which were harvested in the normal way. Which got mixed up with olive tashar, which were left on the tree for poor people. Some of them got mixed up inadvertently. Now, Rabbi Yisrael, the olives left on the tree for poor people, are they chayiv in Trumas Ma'asros? No. So they got mixed together. Invei batim, invei olulos. You have grapes which are harvested the normal way, which got mixed up with grapes which are left for poor people on the tree, on the vine, the chule. In both these cases, we say it's not batel. It's not batel. Ask well, why isn't it batel? V'lav tevel shnibav divreimu. Isn't it tevel which is so? Isn't it tevel to Rabbanon? So says the Gemara. Rabbi Mona. Rabbi Mona said, "Kemti." I resolved the question. Shemen zeisei misuk. It's talking about the olive oil of the olive oil of olives which are normally harvested. Sheisarvim shemen zeisei nikuf, which got mixed up with oil of olives which were left for the poor people. Now, the Gemara's kasha was on olives. Gemara's teretz goes on olive oil. The obvious question is that Trumas and Ma'asros and olives is the Raisa. So of course here the tevel should not be bought over in fact, right? How can you say live tevel shouldn't be divreimu? It's not the divreimu, it's the Rabbanan. It's the Raisa because it's olives and grapes. So there's he brings down here. There's a sheet of the Ramban and Rabbeinu Yoina that made the Raisa only the olive oil and grape juice is chayiv, not regular olives or regular grapes. So that's why the question was olive oils and grape juice, olives and grapes, which only the Rabbanan, the table should be bought, and we see it's not. The conclusion is it's talking about the oil and the wine, which is tevel d'oraisa, and that's why it's not bought. The thing is like this. That's the Rash Siroleo, however, is so bothered by this question of how the olives and grapes come to be the Rabbanan that he actually changes the shot here to make it in line with what the Kavanogi said previously. That here the reason why the olives and grapes are exempt midaraisa is not because the olives and grapes are exempt and only oil and grape juice is chayiv, but rather because it's not nigmar malachta. So about olives which are intended to press and grapes which are intended to press, and therefore the Gemara Malach is only after pressing. And therefore, before pressing, it's not fully complete yet, and that's why it's batel at that stage. Okay?
Most olives are grown for pressing.
Right.
Not for eating.
That'd be right. So most olives would not be truma d'oraisa until they're actually pressed. Okay? Right. Okay? Says Mara, well, you don't have this. L'zera chayav. Yeah, you don't have that. Rabbi Mona. Rabbi said, "Lo shana elazera." That's only if you replanted the turnips and radishes to make seed or lechel. But if you replanted turnips and radishes in order to eat them when they grow again, potter. Why? Because of course there's no loss in that case. Because it's just getting recycled as food, not as seed. Said, "Lo shana makes no difference. Bein lezera, bein lochel. Whether he planted them for the purpose of seed or food." It makes no makes no difference. Regardless, we say that you have to meiser before you replant. Okay? So lo shayim ben zer ben lechol chayiv. I left out the word chayiv. Ask Maraki say this. Vatnina mibnei shu garnon. It says, when do I have to take off the trumas from the turnips and radishes before replanted? Only if this is the exclusive gorin they're going to have. This is the only time they're going to be gathered as a pile of food. Later on, they're going to be seed. But in your case, they're going to be food later on, right? So why take the trumas and mitzvahs now? Take the trumas and mitzvahs later on. So Rabbi Chanina said, you know why? It's about a specific case here. The truth is, you're right. Avadi, you're right. That if you're going to replant them, it's definitely not going to be chayiv in Trumas and Ma'asros the first time around. I'm asking with you. You only take a Trumas and Ma'asros the second time around. So what do you mean to say? Ben lezer ben lechol chayiv. What do you mean to say? He meant to make a very specific halacha. He wanted to say that in a case where you planted them the first time in the second year, neshumachnisam in a sheni lo'ani. The first time you plant them in a meiser sheni year. The next time you plant them in a meiser on a year, so if I let you replant without tithing in the middle, the Levi is going to lose out. not the Levi, the Yerushalmi is going to lose out. And vice versa. If you replant from a third year to a fourth year, then the poor person is going to lose out. So in that case specifically, he meant to say, and then only in that case, you have to meiser before you replant. Where you're replanting for food, in that case you have to meiser in the middle. Again, because otherwise somebody's going to lose because of the confluence of the years here. Okay? I don't know if confluence fit into that sentence properly. What's the improper use of an English vocabulary word? What?
It's okay.
No, it's not okay. Okay, back to the Mishnah. V'tzalim sheish rishu. The last three words in the Mishnah, the last three lines in Mishnah. V'tzalim sheish rishu ba'aliyah. This is it's a funny case. You left your onions in your attic, so they took root in your attic. Okay, the attics actually had pitch between the attic and the first floor as the ceiling. So the onions actually took root in the ceiling, okay, between the floors. So taro milatami, they're no longer matami because they're ready mechuber lakarka. They grew. However, and the Gemara's going.
When they say shvishu, that means literally the roots came into a dirt or some kind of substance. Well, because you can leave olives.
Yes, no. We're going to talk about that case. No, this is literally. As opposed to the case you're talking about. We're going to talk about that too. Taru milatami, they're no longer tame. Now it's interesting, we're going to pick up on this. It's very strange. Because vis-a-vis Meiser and Shvius, you don't have to Meiser them again. And they retain whatever halacha Shemitah they had till now. Whatever year they were is the year they continue to be affiliated with. But vis-a-vis Tumantara, they lose their Tumantara. The Gemara is going to learn out from Gezeres HaKosov that the parameters of Tumantara being planted vis-a-vis Tumantara are different than the parameters of being planted vis-a-vis Meiser and Shemitah. Okay, it's a fascinating concept. Nafleim HaPoilas, what happens if an avalanche fell on them? Your roof caved in, right? Vein Megulin, and the upper leaves are still revealed. Harein Kretu B'Sod, it's mamish like they're planted down the field in that case. It's mamish like planted in the field because they're covered by the avalanche and some of them is poking up. In that case, they're like replanted altogether and they lose any status of harvested. They're like fully new, fresh planted. Okay? To the Gemara. I'm Rabbi Yechanan. You have just Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yochanan B'Shem Rabbi Yanai said, Harei Moshe B'Tzoli. You got the place, Mr. Zuger? Mr. Zuger, you haven't? Harei Moshe B'Tzoli M'Shishrisha. You have a pile of onions which took root. Hatolish Men B'Shabbos. Nonetheless, if you uproot from those onions on Shabbos, Potter, you're exempt. Why? Because Ve'eno Roitze B'Ashrosh Hasonin. You don't want them to take root. In other words, says the Eglei Tal, the circle lover, says that you only is considered to be planting when you want something planted. If something takes root inadvertently, it's not planted. What? That has to be a major right. It's a tremendous chiddush. It's a very difficult chiddush to say, because then no weed should ever consider planted. But I guess it means where it originally was severed from the ground. It was like onions in a bag, right? Not where it's weeds, which they regenerate on their own without your intervention. So you understand what I'm saying? There has to be some sort of distinction, albeit tenuous, between onions and weeds, but there's got to be one, okay? But that's halach here. On Shabbos you're potter. You don't want them there. On Rabbi Shimon Lakish, said, come on, give me a break, Rabbi Yochanan. My ichbalah, how can you copy Shabbos gabe Ma'asros, Shabbos to Ma'asros? Meaning, how can you compare the two? They're not comparable at all, right? The truth is, he's not attacking Rabbi Yochanan so much because it seems Rabbi Yochanan was saying a brisa. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yanai was saying it's a brisa. So he says, how can you compare the two? By Meiser, perhaps has to do with whether you intend to plant it or not. And here you didn't intend to plant it. But by Shabbos, it should have to do inherently with the connection to the ground. And he brings out a very interesting halacha here, which I did not know. If you uproot a mushroom on Shabbos, so you're chayav chatos. It does grow in the ground. It doesn't get its nourishment from the ground. So he's saying kav chomer. If an onion, mushroom, which grows in the ground, even though it doesn't get its nourishment from the ground, is chayav. So certainly in this case, right, where it is getting its nourishment now from the ground, so it should be chayav, right? That's really part of Reish Lakish's kasha. So they said, you know what, Reish Lakish, nice question, but Lamais, it's not just a Bryce, it's even a Mishnah. V'lokein tani tninon. Didn't we learn in a Mishnah? Where's this Mishnah? Kilayim. Eno cheshish lo mishum kilayim. There's no problem of kilayim. V'lo mishum shvius nor shmita. V'lo mishum meisers nor meiser. V'nitolim b'Shabbos tilatum on Shabbos. Now the cases like this, case which we had in Klein was where you had you're storing. You all remember the case when I told you you're storing turnips on the ground. You're storing them on Shabbos. So the Gemara in Shabbos says, the Gemara in a couple of places says that you're allowed to pick up the turnips by their leaves as long as the leaves are sticking up above the ground and remove them from the ground. They're not considered to be. If they were completely covered over, you couldn't remove them because of muktzah. But if the leaves are sticking up, you can move them by the leaves. And there, the implication is you don't care even if they took root. Why don't you care? Because you didn't want them to take root. So we see, like Rabbi Yochanan, named Rabbi Yana, it's not just a Bryce, it's a Mishnah. That on Shabbos, the parameters are different, right? Amar le Rabbi Zira, Rabbi Avo, Chabezim and Bez at the top now. Rabbi Zira said to Rabbi Avo, Chamei ma Omar. Listen to what Reish Lakish really said. He didn't listen to him. Lo amar elamai ichtula Shabbos gabi Ma'asros. He wasn't asking on one second. Let me start the page again. So front top of base on base again. Amalei Rabbi Zira Rabbi Avo. Chame me'amer. Listen to what Reish Lakish said. Loma elamai ichbula Shabbos gabi Ma'asros. He all he said is, what's the comparison between Shabbos and Ma'aser? Hashvi's ichbula. Rabbi Zira, it's a new sugya in Chofetz on base. I was confused because I was trying to correlate it back to the previous one. He's asking a separate question. He's bringing up a separate issue. Amalei Zira Rabbi Avo. I come and see something which bothering me. Chamei my Omer. See what Reish Lakish said. I went back to the beginning of the page again. Lo mar elamayich b'la Shabbos gabi Ma'aser. See, he had a problem with the comparison between Shabbos and Ma'aser, which you just dealt with. But Hashvi'is ichbula. But wait a minute. What happens is he's saying a very big chiddush. He's saying that Shvi'is is the same parameters as Ma'aser. If he wants them to take root in the ground, in the second floor, wherever, then when they regrow and it's during a Shemitah year, they become Svichim of Shvi'is and they are prohibited. They become Shemitah growth are forbidden. And if not, if he doesn't want them to regrow, Mutayim Mishum Svichim. Then they do not become Svichim, even though they took root, and they remain permissible. So he says, look what happened by Shemitah. By Shemitah, Reish Lakish himself agrees. By Shabbos, he raised the ruckus. But by Shemitah, even Reish Lakish agrees it all has to do with your das. If you want it re-rooted, so then it gets the status of Shemitah fruit. If you don't want it re-rooted, so then it doesn't get the status of Shemitah fruit. Says Amalei Rabbi Yaishya. Rabbi Yaishya said, Amalei Rabbi Maishel, Rabbi Zira. Maishel said to Rabbi Zira, V'doi the Rabbah? That's the bigger chiddush. The chiddush by Shabbos is much bigger. But you're saying that by Shemitah, it's a big chiddush? It's a much bigger chiddush by Shemitah, by Shabbos. Because, by Shabbos, which as Reish Lakish is pointing out, that by Shabbos, to say that you're exempt, by Chiyuv Skila, by Daraisa, Svichim might only be the Rabbana. but Shabbos is definitely Doraisa. So that's a much bigger Chiddush. So V'doi D'Rab again literally means, is this the bigger Chiddush? Shabbos is a much bigger Chiddush. And says the Gemara, Ilu Tana Batzil Yechidi Yos. The truth is that if vis-a-vis your thing, which you just brought up of Shemitah, you know what? Reish Lakish should be a Chiddush if it's talking about a single onion. Because in a single onion, I would say that's Derech Zriya. Normally you plant single onions. So single onions that Shemitah shouldn't apply to it. When it takes root in the ground, that's a Chiddush. But it's not a big Chiddush when we're talking about a pile of onions. Because a pile of onions, it's not derech to plant a pile of onions. So therefore, if some of them took root, it's not such a big chiddush to say that Shemitah doesn't take up hold of it. Because it's not considered to be derech zriya altogether. But by Shabbos, where it's not contingent on derech zriya, because we said mushrooms are the same status, so there, it's a much bigger chiddush to say that you're exempt on Shabbos. So, what he's saying is that Rabbi Zira pointed out by Shemitah, it's a big chiddush. Shemitah has to do with das. And then he said, it's not such a big chiddush. Because Shemitah is the Shemitah, I look at whether it's considered planted or not as people plant. And you could say that our Rema, people generally don't have in mind to plant a whole pile. So therefore it could be that it's stock exempt from Shemitah, even if it took root during Shemitah. But Shabbos has nothing to do with that. It has to do with absolutes. Right? It's not subjective, it's objective. Is it connected to the ground or not connected to the ground? Then this is connected to the ground. So therefore in this case, to say that Shabbos still does not apply, that is the biggest chiddush of all. Okay?
Something is going hydroponically. So we know for Shemitah it's exempt for Shemitah.
Also for Shabbos.
For Shabbos too, you can uproot it?
Yeah, I mean, the Raisa, not the Rabbanan. There's a yes. Okay, not the Rabbanan, because you're taking it out of its sustenance. But the Raisa could, because the Raisa only has to do with the ground. Okay, Tanya, we went to the Raisa, but Solim Shish Rishu. Onions which took roots. The Kupa. In a box. Now you don't have these words, I think. Zebazet. Do you have Zebazet? Yeah. That's important. This is the case similar to what you said before. There's no dirt in the box. They're only onions. So the onions, where do the roots of the onions go? Into each other. They grew roots and the roots penetrated the other onion. So of course that's meaningless. They retained the old character by Meiser Shvius, which we could have guessed. But not only that, if they were Tomei, Lo Lumi De Tumas, and they still retained their Tumah. Because they didn't take root in it. What? Right, it's nothing, it's meaningless. If they took root in the second floor, as we mentioned in Mishnah, they still have the status, their old status, vis-a-vis Meiser and Shvius. But if they're Tomei, only they lose the status of Tumah. Now, because this is a contradiction, this is a paradoxical. The Cheskas, on the one hand, you say vis-a-vis Trumas, Shemitah, and Meises, they retain their previous status. But on the other side, you say that they lose the status of Tumah. How could that be? One should be contingent on the other. Says more than not. Rabbi Yezim Shem Rabbi Elo said, "Hatoya Ribsa B'Tara Zroim." The Torah said that Zroim are very, very mutter. What does it mean, Zroim very, very mutter? No matter how they're planted, even to a very minor extent, that's sufficient. How do you know that? Because it says, my time, what's supposed to teach us is that, Kipo minivlosam, kol zera zarua asher yizarea. I know you don't have the end of the pasuk there. But it says, zera zarua asher yizarea. Any way in which it can be planted, even the most remote way of planting, that's already considered to be planting. So therefore, the parameters of what's considered to be planted, vis-a-vis Tumah, and taking on, putting off Tumah, putting on or taking off Tumah, are much more lenient than those vis-a-vis any other area of Allah, including status vis-a-vis Meiser and Shemitah. Okay? Again, Zeres HaKosov. Tanya, we learned, Lo Yitlosh. This is the same case we talked about before. You shouldn't, if your pile of onions took root on Shabbos, So you shouldn't pluck it out. Over v'tolash, what happens if you did transgress and pluck it out? Is Tani, there's some Tanoim who learn Chayev. We stone you. These Tani, mutter. There's someone say, go ahead and do l'chatchila. Go right ahead. So the Gemara raises its eyebrows too, not just you. Says Gemara, there's a funny language. Reb Chaim Kanievsky explains this. He brings down Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Ma damar Chayev. If one guy said Chayev, here it's not the person who said Chayev, but rather, if one person said Chayev, then what should be the other person's opinion? Patur. If one person said Asur, then what should the other person's opinion be? Mutter. In other words, we never find polar machloksim like this. That one person says Chayev, and the other person says Mutter. It always goes down one notch, not two. So if one person said Chayev, the other person should say Patur Avalosar. If one person said Patur Avalosar, then the other person could have said Mutter. And the Gemara is saying you have to amend the machlokas in that way. Nicha, so it's all one. It should be Manamar Chayev Patur Asar Mutter Nicha. That would make sense, but the way it's written doesn't make sense. So it says Gemara Lo Tzurcha Da Ella. It says the lo, but it's Da Ella. It's not a question. Rather, you should say Da Ella means don't say this. Rather, Mutter. Taka. One person says Mutter and the other person says Asar. Rabbi Shimon says no. That's Rabbi Yochanan. That really was consistent with Rabbi Yochanan before, because Rabbi Yochanan is the one who said that this is not considered to be planted vis-a-vis Shabbos. Reish Lakish, who asked him, Rabbi Yochanan, how can you copy the halachas of Ma'aser to Shemitah? So he changed it to gears in the other direction. It says one opinion says Chayev, and the other opinion holds Patur Avalon. Mishabo Lonas Ma'aser. Once they've reached the period in which they could be Ma'aser, Elo Lamishin to somebody who's not believed on Ma'aser because of Lif Neiver. Lo b'shmiis now to say a fruit drink Shemitah. L'mishu chol chosher al Shmiis, somebody who's suspect on Shmiis, again because of Lif Neiver, because they might use it for illicit purposes. V'im bichru, what happens if they already started growing stuff in the fields, right? Stuff which is suitable to be meiser, and other stuff is still less than that. Noita, so b'chayris, you take the stuff which is raised for meiser, you harvest it. You can sell the rest, which is still premature. Similarly, loyim karadam is tivno. A person is finished threshing his straw, but he sells it to somebody who's going to thresh it again to get out whatever's really left in the straw. Veskaposo. Person also has olives, which he's already squeezed the oil out of, but he sells somebody else who's going to squeeze it out again. Vezag of his grape skins, he already squeezed out, sells it somebody who's going to squeeze them out a second time. You shouldn't do the mishaeno neman al maestros to somebody who's not credible on maestros. Lotim and marsh, he should get out the beverages or the grain again because they're not going to maestro properly. It's lif neiver vim hotzi, because if they do produce grape juice or olive oil or grain the second time around, chayavim a meiser. You have to take a meiser off of them. However, pturim minat truma. On the second time around, it's exempt from truma. Why is that? Because truma has no specific shiur midoraisa, right? So therefore, the guy took off truma on the first time. If it's this guy or a different guy, doesn't make a difference. When the take off truma the first time on the first batch, belibo he had in mind ala koitim, on those which are threshed or pressed, val studying whatever's left on the sides, and everything which is still inside the straw. So therefore, truma works the first time for all cycles of squeezing and usage afterwards. Meiser, each time you squeeze out a little bit more, you got to meiser a little bit more. Okay, that's why it's lifnei iver. If you give it at any stage, so a person's not going to take off the meiser once he squeezes it out another time. Okay, let's go to the Gemara. Kini masdisa. This is the way to read the Gemara, the Mishnah. Lo yimkar adam sadeu. It's talking about even if you don't want to sell your field. No, it's fruit for shteitzach. Obviously, you can't sell to a person who's suspect on Meiser, but you can't even sell your field. You can't even sell your field. Tana Rishim Matir, Bibnei Shuomer, because he says, Harei Mochati Shali, I sold my stuff. He says to the Kohanim and Levim, I sold my stuff. I didn't cause you any deprivation. Now it's your turn. Say, go out yourselves, Utvar Shachon, go and demand your own, go and demand your Trumus and Meisos. Now, this is a very important halacha. We paskin this way, Tzitz Eliezer brings this down, that in matters of sale, there's no issue of lifnei iver.
There is
no issue of lifnei iver. It's only in giving. In giving something to somebody, there's lifnei iver. In selling, you're not responsible for what he does with it after he takes it.
This is for any sale, or is it only Trumas and Meiser?
Any sale.
Like Shabbos clothes.
You don't say that in Chicago.
Can a Jewish merchant sell a suit that has Shabbos into a Jew?
That's different. That's not because of lifnei iver. You're not allowed to do schleira on Shabbos. You're not allowed to get any andor from Shabbos. Okay, it's avera to buy and sell Shabbos. That's a separate isser. But lifnei iver is only if you to lifnei iver is the davar amuter. You take and you sell it to somebody. You sell a house to a non-religious Jew. So he's going to use the house to turn on lights on Shabbos and Yom Tov, right? How's that permissible? It's lifnei iver, right?
Yeah, but he would do it regardless of where we live.
So what? It's still the best them should drive it down and say, hey, they're over avera, but not it should still be usher, right? So the thing is to sell something which has a mutter purpose to somebody who might later on do something also with it. The Tzitz Eliezer says, others paskin as well, and they probably derive it from this Gemara, ultimately, that's okay. Just like here, I'm selling my field. What happens afterwards? That's the other guy's cheshbon. When I give, so that's called what's it called in English? What? Abetting, aiding and abetting, right? When I give, there's a better word for it, but I can't even. What?
Accomplice?
Yeah, no, accomplice is not too strong a word. There's a better word, but I can't read. Enabling. That's enabling. Okay, but here I'm not enabling, I'm selling. It's a different parameter in halacha. Okay? It's a fine line, but it is a line. We agree on that, or we just skeptical?
I'm just thinking that, so knows the sale of a Mizrahi building.
It was a separate issue. Now that they sell a shul to be a church.
But they're heterim for that in terms of you do it through a third party or something like that.
They're not heterim. Or Moshe says they're not heterim. Because they're haroma nikeres. Yeah. You're supposed to destroy shuls as you leave them. It's like a beautiful building. It's still there. It looks very nice. Yeah. That now I have to say that actually now since it's a church. Forgot that.
They told me they just came back from Prague.
Yeah.
And there's some shuls, there were a number of shuls that were destroyed after the communists took over.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they were going to make use of factories.
Well, factories are okay.
The communists destroyed
The communists themselves.
Yes.
But Bnei Ruvain, when they moved out of the west side, they destroyed their own building because of this reason. To their everlasting credit, there are very few shuls which actually did that.
They destroyed their show?
Yeah, they destroyed it. They knocked it down. Yeah, for this reason. Okay? It's a terrible Chil Hashem. You go down there and see what's going on. All right. Says Avar Machar, you transgressed and sold. Ma'aser mashu ochel. You have to estimate what this is not like Rosh Gamliel. Of course, Rosh Gamliel says you're allowed to sell, right? But according to Rabbanol, you're not allowed to sell. So Avar Machar Ma'aser mashu ochel. You have to estimate how much the buyer is going to eat and Ma'aser for him. Veinu Ma'aser mashu lokeh moicher. You don't have the Ma'aser what the buyer is going to sell to others. Because we're not responsible for tricksters, meaning sinners. In other words, Lifnei Iver was only to the guy who you sold, but not to the guy to whom he's going to sell. That's no longer your achrayus. So it seems to be an arbitrary cutoff point, but it is, I guess you have to have some cutoff points. It's only the person who I immediately facilitate his affair, not anybody else down the line. Okay? Now, go further, Mishnah says that if the second guy threshed again or did whatever again, so he there chayiv and trumas umaisus, right? So tani lo yitro. So there chayiv meiser, not truma. Tani lo yitro. Since the first truma worked for all the cycles of pressing, you shouldn't take truma the second time round. What if he did take off truma nonetheless? Right? The more truma the merrier. Rabbi Mona said no. Lo yafakocho. It's not gesundheit. The more the merrier. It's bad. Also, truma shumarvish tobels the meiser, because the second truma you took off is really tevel vis-a-vis meiser. Why is it tevel vis-a-vis meiser? Because already all the truma which would have to be taken off was taken off the first time. So this is not bona fide truma. So this truma really is fake truma. If it's fake truma, it must be meisered in order for the kohen to be allowed to eat it. So this is a problem. The second truma is a bad thing. Okay. Rabbi Chananya chavin the Rabbanan. Rabbi Chananya, the friend of the rabbis. Boy, he asked, Toram echad mishishim. If somebody took truma 1/60th, shu echad mishishim ve'echad alakitin. It's not. So it's 1/60th to begin with. But if you take into account the recycling, the pressing cycles, or the second threshing cycle, then it's only 1/61st, not 1/60th. So it's less than the parameter Rabbanan gave or generally gave. So Torah echad mishishim shu echad mishishim ve'echad kitim v'alatzadim on the stuff which is done the second time, v'alatzadim and the stuff which gets scattered after the first time, mashtochatev and stuff which is going to be threshed the second time in the straw. Is that permissible? What's the halacha? Can he redo it again? Rabbi Yezer, he said, no, can't, because our Mishnah says, when the first time around he takes the truma, even though it turns out in the end to be less than the 60th, that rate suffices. Ala koitim, he had in mind, or basically at least has in mind for him. And the koitim, that which gets cut off or recycled, the bottom line is, what's the klum tzricha b'yeser? What's the chiddush that it works? The chiddush is that even if it comes out to be more, meaning in this case less, in other words, it's less than 1/60th, nonetheless it works. Because the 1/60th is shiur the Rabbanan. The rice of mashu is enough. So that's what the rabbi said, that even if the 1/60th, which you have to have, only pertains to the first cycle. Even if the later cycles make it less, it's still that's sufficient, and therefore it's bad to take off truma later on again. Okay? Halacha base back to the Mishnah. Halokech saw the yerek. This is back on Chav Gimel, still on Chav Gimel Amral. So I thought, yeah. Halokech saw the yerek, you saw the yerek. Even if you take buy a vegetable field, certainly a fruit field, which is more a chayiv and shumas midaraisa, right? But you bought a vegetable field in Syria. If you took it before it grew a third or whatever the shear is, depending what the vegetable fruit is, then you're chayiv. If you bought it after it reached onas ha'maisros, where it already became mature under the goy's regime, part it's exempt. You yourself can go and collect, but you can't hire workers. Just as to remind you that you got away with a big loophole here. We don't have to remind you got away with a loophole. So therefore you can even hire workers and collect make a massive harvest of the field, despite the fact you're going to be exempt from mice at the end of the day. Rosh Gamliel said, when is this true? When you acquired land. But if you just bought the fruit itself, even though you just bought the fruit before it grew even though you bought it before it grew to be chayiv in meiser and became chayiv in meiser on your watch potter, because you have to own land in order to be chayiv in meisers, and here you didn't own the land. Okay, you just bought the fruit. Rabbi Omer aflafi chesh, but Rabbi argues in our Mishnah. Rabbi says, even if you bought it after it grew a third, Say it grows in your possession the remaining 2/3. So you have to give 2/3 of Meiser. Right? If it grows in your hand a quarter of the growth, you have to give a quarter of the crop as Meiser. Everything is relative to the amount of time that you added and the amount of growth which happened on your watch. Okay, is that clear? Back to the bottom of Gimel Amud Aleph, the second to last line. Last line actually. Tani, we learned. Sada Shevia Shlish, a field which grew a third lifnei goy, l'kacham mimenu Yisrael, and then the Jew acquired it. Rabbi Akiva Omer Tosef as potter. Rabbi Akiva says whatever it adds on is exempt. L'chomrim say whatever it adds on is chayev, like Rabbi in our Mishnah. Rabbi Avina v'Ula bar Yishmo v'Shem Rabbi Elazar said, "Av chachamim lo chivu tosef shavar." But a very interesting thing. Even Chachamim who said that whatever grows on your watch, you have to take Meiser corresponding to that proportion. Is El Shav is only on the past. Meaning, let's say it grew a third in a second year. Shema Yosheni Sheni, it grew a third in a year which is regular Meiser Sheni, and then you acquired it in a Meiser Shlishi year. So the 2/3 which grew on your watch, but in a different year than the third which grew and made a chayv of Meiser. So yes, you have to give proportionally 2/3 of the Meiser, but you give it as Meiser Sheni, not as Meiser Oni. And so too, Oni. If you acquired it in the third year, and had grown already, let's say, just to change up, a half in the Goy's possession, and then it grows another half in your possession, so you have to give Trumas Meiser corresponding to your half share. But you give it not based on the fourth year, which is Meiser Sheni, but on the third year based on Meiser, because that's what determines its Meiser quotient. All right, we'll have to stop here for tonight. Can we start 15 minutes early on Monday? You guys willing to start 15 minutes early? Okay. I don't think we'll finish anyway on Monday.
Is Reb Shimon Gamliel's case, does he say his halacha by a sharecropper? Would he say the same thing?
The selling to the sharecropper?
Because the sharecropper is not buying the land, he's not buying the
No.
fruit.
So he's not buying, he's an employee. Won't work in that case.